The Denver Broncos season hangs in the balance this upcoming week on Christmas Eve as they take on the New England Patriots. Regardless if the Broncos make the playoffs or not, is this season successful? We ask Broncos Country, and we break it all down on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Grinch is coming to town this week as Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots prepare to come take on the Denver Broncos on Christmas Eve. Can the Broncos avoid getting coal in their stocking? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. And a special shout out to all the everydayers in Broncos Country. We appreciate you so much. Just a reminder, you can get this podcast for free every single day, all year long, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts for free. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over there, LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Big week ahead here, Sayre, for the Broncos. 3 games remain on the season, 3 of them being AFC conference matchups. And unfortunately, the Broncos not being able to take care of business in 2 road games in the past 3 weeks has put them in a position where they have no choice but to win out if they want to have a chance to make the postseason. Sunday's slate of games certainly didn't help them out in that department either. But I think we got to ask a bigger question here, regardless, kind of putting our feet, being in the moment here. Regardless of how this season ends, even if Denver doesn't make the postseason, in your opinion, is this season a success here for the Denver Broncos? We did ask a poll question to everybody in Broncos Country, but I figure let's get your thoughts here first before we get to the polls.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because obviously you're coming off a super disappointing loss. And if the season ended today, it's like you got a bitter taste in your mouth, right? But thankfully, the Broncos do have 3 games left to see what they can do with that. And I think regardless of what happens over the course of these next 3 weeks, Cody, you've got to look at this season as a success, in my opinion. I mean, you just feel like a much better organization in every possible way, right? I mean, you could look at some individual wins from, the win against the Chiefs to the road win against Buffalo, the fact that they went on a 5-game winning streak to get back into the playoff mix in the first place. I mean, you've got a chance at the playoffs here with just 3 weeks remaining. And really, I mean, you're already 2 wins better than last season. So you've shown improvement with, a pretty similar roster, although some big moves made in the trenches offensively. That was maybe the biggest difference that we've seen from last year to this year. But Cody, to me, I think you do have to look at this as a success, right? It's a team that, there were big expectations going into the year. They fell painfully short in the first month and a half of the season. And then obviously you come screaming back into the mix. So regardless of what happens over these next 3 weeks, I think you do have to consider this season a big time success for the Broncos.
I agree with you there, and I think really it's hard, as we had talked about. I think even the preseason, really before everything really happened, I think it's like, hey, if the Broncos make the postseason, that's great, right? That's great under Sean Payton. It's hard to do that in anybody's first year, but we said, you know what, if anyone could do it, it is Sean Payton. So regardless if they make it or if they miss it, I believe that this season was a success for the reasons that you rattled off, more wins than they had last year. I feel like also maybe another term we can throw out there, and this is something that fans have also used as well, Denver has taken a step in the right direction, right? I think going forward, the overall perspective of them, even going into next season, is very optimistic from the fan base here. And so we asked Broncos Country on social media. We put out a poll out there saying, regardless if Denver makes the postseason or not, do you view the Broncos season as successful from where they currently stand? Over 1,300 votes registered by members in Broncos Country. 84.4% of Broncos Country said yes, that they would view the season as a success or a step in the right direction. 15.6% of 1,300 votes said no. So I think the wide consensus for the most part is, I think Broncos Country accepting, you know what? Okay, even if they don't make the playoffs, they took big strides this season. Now, look, there's fans out there, Sayre, and I'm sure you saw this in your mentions as I saw it in mine following the Detroit game. There are a lot of super emotionally invested, sometimes overly emotional Broncos fans. So many responses that I got yesterday. Well, postseason, playoffs are done. Like, if we're being realistic, if we're being objective, this isn't us being optimistic. We're just saying 3 games left in the season. If Denver wins out, they have a high probability of making the playoffs. That's not us being optimistic. That's not us wearing orange colored glasses. That's just saying that Denver's going to have to take care of business this week against the New England Patriots, which really the stakes at this point, Sayre, with that in mind, that makes Sunday's game coming up against New England. It's going to be on NFL Network once again, primetime action. It makes it that this game, the season is in the balance for Denver in this game in particular. If Denver loses at home, it ends their season effectively. The postseason ambition's gone at this point. But even if that were to be the case, I still think the good perspective is I think Denver overall as a team, as a franchise and an organization, with some of the changes coming up about the new team facility, that there's going to be construction, it's going to be ready in the next 3 years, with who knows what's going to come this offseason. I think that this has been a successful season for Denver, considering they started 1-5.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just so many different factors that play into it as well. And you just really feel like the organization is back on track as a whole, right?
Yeah.
You got ownership that's really learned a lot over their first year and a half on the job, or I guess whatever you want to call it, on the job or in that position, whatever it may be. And bringing in Sean Payton, I really feel like, although some people, I mean, he's not everybody's cup of tea, right? And not everybody likes the screaming on the sideline. Not everybody likes the shortened responses after a loss to the media. But look, I mean, I think Sean Payton goes about things the right way. He's an all-time NFL head coach, and he knows exactly how to win in this league. And I think he understands how to maximize the talent that he has at his disposal. And we've seen plenty of examples of that, right? From Russell Wilson to the guys defensively to the offensive line to, X, Y, or Z. It doesn't matter. It could be anybody, but it just feels like you have a head coach that finally knows how to maximize talent, finally knows how to manage games. Of course, there's discrepancies throughout the season, and nobody is perfect, right? Nobody's going to make all the right decisions all the time, but you just feel like you have a head coach that you can trust in that regard. So I just feel like with the trajectory of where they've been, the proof being out there as far as, hey, we're not having to make excuses after a bunch of losses. Like the Broncos have been winning games and they're in the mix. They were 1 game behind the Chiefs in the AFC West going into this weekend. So I don't know that you could have asked much more out of Sean Payton this year than what we've got. I think a lot of fans would have been happy with just beating the Kansas City Chiefs this year if that was all that was good that happened. And the Broncos did that. They ended that streak. They beat the Chargers at SoFi. First time they've won at SoFi against the Chargers. They got a chance to beat the Raiders for the first time since 2018 or 19, something like that. So it's been a good season overall for the Broncos. And I think they have a chance to really finish strong and put kind of an exclamation mark on how much better it truly has been.
Sean Payton has been the right guy. He's the right choice for the head coaching job. And look, he's not a pushover. And I think that's something that is good. Not saying that Vic Fangio is a pushover, but some of these other coaches that Denver has had just didn't have that. They're not going to take anything. And I also think it kind of comes back to bite Payton a little bit, as we see with the NFL officiating. Heck, we had Lions fans coming into our comments saying, hey, you guys got hosed by officiating. Not that any of those changed, calls or non-calls would have changed the outcome of the game, but they're like, hey, officiating was bad. Obviously, the NFL has a certain, preference or stance towards Sean Payton. That's definitely a negative aspect of it. But Sean's a guy that's going to push back. He's going to fight for his players. And guys in that locker room, they love that. They respect that. And they think that's super important going forward. And we also think it's important as well as Denver's in the right direction. 84% of everybody in Broncos country believes that regardless of what happens with these final 3 games, that this season was a success for Denver. It's a step in the right direction. We believe that as well. And we're going to keep you along for the ride here, Locked On Broncos. But one thing we're going to take a look at is the Broncos' next upcoming opponent. The New England Patriots are coming to town. In what ways will Bill Belichick's team try to test the Denver Broncos this week? We'll dive deeper to that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there, LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, it's quick, and it's easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, the New England Patriots are going to be a very tough test for the Denver Broncos, even though they're 3-11, even though it looks like they're competing for that number one overall draft pick. And we're going to talk about exactly why they could be a very tough test, especially as the Broncos hope to rebound after getting absolutely destroyed and embarrassed against the Detroit Lions. And hopefully they can, but we'll see. Can they do it against Bill Belichick and company? We're going to discuss that game upcoming and the week upcoming for the Broncos, but want to give a huge shout out and say thank you to all of you listeners of Locked On Broncos, especially those of you everydayers that make us your first listen of the day every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, free and available everywhere that you listen to podcasts. And we're so excited to see what comes of this. I mean, obviously, Cody, it's not a great position to be in for the Denver Broncos, but man, it's a great position for the Broncos to be in, to still be alive at this point in the season. And look, I know the standard is always higher than that in Broncos country. You always want to be competing for first place in the AFC West. You always want to be able to be in the mix of the playoffs. But really, this is the first time they've even been in the discussion since, 2021, similar time of year with Teddy Bridgewater. When he went down with an injury, they were kind of in the discussion, but don't know that anyone was really taking them super seriously at that point. The last time before that, 2016, with Gary Kubiak and Trevor Siemian. And it feels like a lot of the times, no matter what, the Broncos are always facing a late season matchup against the Patriots when they are relevant in the playoff mix. That's no different this year, as Bill Belichick, like you mentioned at the top of the show, the Grinch, he's coming to town. You just can't help but wonder. Is he going to steal Christmas from Broncos fans, or is the Broncos playoff, chances and hopes, are those going to grow 3 sizes like the old Grinch's heart? Let me know your thoughts on why this Patriots matchup is so tough for Denver.
Yeah, I think when you look at what they do well defensively, they're stingy. And that's something you always expect out of a Bill Belichick coach team, is that their defense, regardless, they're always going to find ways to ramp up some pressure, make things very congested for you to try to take away options. And I think one of the bigger things, and we saw, look, New England, they lost 27-17 to Kansas City over the weekend. But there were moments throughout that game where the New England Patriots were punching the Chiefs in the mouth. They were kind of exchanging jabs back and forth. And I think defensively, we saw the Broncos struggle with this department in Saturday's game against the Detroit Lions. And to me, I look at the New England Patriots and how they play defensively, and I think to myself, they're going to try to take a similar approach out of it. They're going to try to stop the Broncos from running the football. They held the Chiefs. The Chiefs only had 43 total yards rushing in Sunday's game. And granted, they won by 10 points, but they didn't have success running the football. That to me is a little bit of a concern. It was not there for them overall in this game. And they're very stingy, and they generate different pressure looks. Like one thing we saw the Detroit Lions do is we saw them from the field side, right? There's the field, which is the longer side of the field, and then the boundary is the closer side. So if the ball's on the right hash, and let's say, okay, the field side is going to be the left side, the boundary is going to be the right side there, they would send a field side blitz. That's what the Detroit Lions did after Russell Wilson off of his blind side where nobody could see him. No one could pick it up, and it led to Russ getting hit several times against the Lions. Bill Belichick is going to see all these things that Aaron Glenn did and say, you know what, we're going to do this. We're going to ramp the pressure up. And until the Broncos showcase that they can move the ball and counteract it, then that's going to be the strategy we see from teams the remainder of the season. And that to me is a little bit of concern with this defense. It's stingy. It's aggressive. They fly around. They disguise really well. And they have some guys that can play the football, in terms of the air there. So I think with Denver's lack of an intermediate passing game, I'm a little concerned about New England's defense coming into this matchup here, obviously for the Broncos this upcoming Sunday. And, in your opinion, kind of seeing what you saw from the Chiefs-Patriots game, what stands out to you? What concerns you a little bit here about the Patriots this week as they prepare to come to town?
I just think anytime you're playing a Bill Belichick coach team, right? Whether the Patriots are 3-11, it doesn't really matter to me. I think anytime you're going up against a coach like that, they are dangerous. And I felt that way even for the Chiefs, even though the Chiefs, you felt like they were going to get back on track. You felt like, hey, they should be able to go in and beat a 3-10 team. the Chiefs are just at a different level of operating than the Denver Broncos right now, quite frankly, even with their struggles offensively. And so, yeah, you do worry about this. Of course, there's a lot at stake once again. So you're already kind of anxious about the game in that way. But yeah, Bill Belichick and his defense, they are going to, you don't often see them being the reason why the Patriots are losing games. Let's just put it that way. I mean, you're going to have to make Bailey Zappi make mistakes, right? You're going to have to stop Ezekiel Elliott, and you're going to have to stop Hunter Henry, who, I mean, hey, the tight end position coming to Denver, anybody that's playing against this Denver defense at the tight end position's got to be licking their chops as well. So you just feel like a Bill Belichick coach team, they're going to be pretty well prepared, even if they lack the talent to be able to match up with certain teams. They're going to be prepared, and they don't really have much to lose right now, Cody, other than draft positioning. And those players and coaches, they do not care about it. There's no tanking that's really going on, obviously, in the NFL. I mean, I guess if you were to ever accuse any coach of tanking, it might be Bill Belichick with his history and things like that, right? But I wouldn't put it past him, right? So, but not accusing, of course, just saying, hey, Bill Belichick, he's tried to pull a lot of stuff through the years. But hey, the Patriots, they are always going to be tough as long as he's their head coach, right? And you feel like you know exactly what kind of brand of football you're getting, and that's what kind of brings the concern for this game.
Well, and obviously there's a lot of rumblings, a lot of speculation that Bill Belichick after the season will be out of his way, would no longer be a part of the New England Patriots, which has led to some speculation. Maybe he ends up in the AFC West with the Los Angeles Chargers, which would be very interesting here. You mentioned Hunter Henry. Obviously, he had a big game for them. Devontae Parker's a very talented receiver. I mean, they have a multitude of guys. They even have Mike Gesicki, if coming over from the Dolphins this past season. He's another tight end option for them, receiving option that they have. And Bailey Zappi seems to be a little bit more competent in terms of operating the offense from a quarterback standpoint than Mac Jones was. So this is going to be a test. Obviously, I think for them, Cole Strange was carted off in the game and ruled out pretty quickly against Kansas City. So that's something to watch in terms of the injury side of things. We'll obviously have you follow, up to date with what's going on with this Broncos team throughout the week as practice builds up. We're going to do some other previews as well. But obviously, that is a big, big stance here. The Patriots, even though that their record is 3-11, they're dangerous, and they're going to try to end the Broncos season this upcoming Sunday. Will the Broncos be able to rise to the occasion? That is the question that we have here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. One thing we're going to dive deep into as well. Sunday and overall, the weekend games were not very friendly to the Denver Broncos and their playoff chances. We talk about how some other former Broncos really kind of put the kebab and impacted Denver's chances a little bit more significantly over the weekend. You'll get all that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's number one sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL, they offer to stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Once again, if you place a $5 bet on the money line for any team, whether it's the Broncos, whether it's the Patriots, then if any of those teams win and you put that $5 on them, you'll wake up with $150 in bonus bets if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now with the NFL season approaching toward the end of the regular season, getting ready for the postseason, the NBA season in full swing, NHL on the ice. You get all of that action at FanDuel Sportsbook, and you all get it on an app that is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. The Broncos are 5.5-point home favorites against the Patriots going into this week's game. Will that line change throughout the week? FanDuel will have you covered with all the action necessary. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. Once again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, real quick, wanted to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country. Thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. Every single day, you can get this podcast for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. One thing we're going to dive deep into here on today's episode of the show, the AFC playoff picture, realistically speaking, after this week's games. I mean, all across the NFL, everything that the Broncos needed to have happen here, Sayre, unfortunately, did not happen. It started on Saturday. It extended and matriculated into Sunday's games, and it's made it to where the Broncos in the playoff picture right now, you see the in the hunt graphic, they're at the bottom there. They're that last team there. So that means they are on life support. Their season hangs in the balance against the Patriots on Sunday, and they are going to require a little bit of help from some teams around the NFL in the next 3 weeks. They're going to have to hope some teams win and some teams lose. What did Sunday's slate of games tell us about the AFC playoff picture?
Yeah, really bad news all around for the Denver Broncos, right? Obviously, Saturday, the Vikings couldn't close the job against the Cincinnati Bengals. They're now 8-6. You kind of just took the wash with the Colts and the Steelers playing against each other, right? So one of those teams was going to win, barring a tie, which we did almost get on Sunday between the Titans and the Texans there, which that would have complicated things even further. But man, worse is that the Texans found a way to win that game. So the Texans won. The Browns found a way to beat the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears dropped a Hail Mary on the final play of the game. I mean, we just can't make any of this stuff up. And then the Buffalo Bills, of course, you figure, well, they might have a decent shot of losing to the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, we're recording this during that game, but as I last saw, they were kicking the Cowboys' butts. So we'll see what ends up happening in that game. Nothing's over till it's over. But ultimately, the Broncos they went over this weekend, including losing their own opportunity against Detroit. Everybody that you needed to lose games, except for the Steelers, who one of those teams had to win, one of those teams had to lose. Everybody that you needed to lose a game won, and they all won, and they all moved up ahead of you in the AFC wildcard standings. So including the Chiefs. We didn't even really mention the Chiefs, right? You were one game behind the Chiefs, had a chance to potentially keep pace with them, at least a game behind. Can't do that. Your games back in the division. Even the Raiders are kind of creeping up behind now at 6-8. So, I mean, it just was a horrible weekend overall for the Denver Broncos. So, like you said, Cody, got to find a way to win these last 3 games. There's no more room for error. That Lions game was it, and even that may be detrimental. That Houston game a couple weeks back, that could end up being detrimental as well. So really a tough position for the Denver Broncos to be in with 3 games to play.
Well, let's take a look at next week's games because that's going to be a big impactful thing. Obviously, we know Denver has to win. That's going to be probably the biggest thing. They have to win. But you look at some of those teams ahead of Denver. The Bengals will take on the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously next Saturday as well, prior to obviously the day before the Denver plays. The Buffalo Bills, unfortunately, they get to play the Los Angeles Chargers, which is not good news for Denver. Even though Denver still has the tiebreaker at this point, you need Buffalo to lose one of those games, hopefully. The Colts that are 8-6, they take on the Atlanta Falcons on the road, and the Falcons just lost to the Carolina Panthers over the weekend. But then this one I think will be a little interesting. Christmas Eve, the Cleveland Browns will play the Houston Texans, who should have C.J. Stroud back. Obviously, we talked about their ability to find a way to win this past week. Not ideal for Denver for both of those teams, but one of those teams is going to lose. And I think you have to kind of hope that the Browns at this point are going to beat the Texans, considering that the Browns, they're still 9-5. Denver's obviously got the tiebreaker over them, but they're 2 games back with 3 games left. The best case scenario would be the Texans, and then obviously you're going to have to hope that Denver takes care of business. The Texans lose yet another game in the next 3 weeks coming up here. Aside from that, you look at the other matchups. The Raiders will play the Chiefs, which ideally, if you talked about them creeping up a little bit, if the Chiefs can take care of business, we already know they're more than likely going to secure the division, and then that would bounce the Raiders out of playoff contention. And then aside from that, I mean, those are really the games we have to pay attention to besides Denver needing to take care of business at 7-7 against the 3-11 New England Patriots. Next week is going to be a very, very interesting week around the NFL, but we always talk about how the stakes are high. And unfortunately, I mean, Sayre, this is where we always talk about, right? As a coach, I always hate playing these games where it's like, if we would have taken care of business this week, then, we wouldn't be in this situation. We could say that about the Broncos early on in the season against the Raiders, against the Commanders. Heck, even in that Jets game, I think they could have had situations and moments where they could have been in it. And then they've just had opportunities slip through their fingertips in the early part of the season, which part of me wonders if Denver was how they are now from an identity standpoint, would they have won those games, in weeks 1 and weeks 2? Maybe not. We don't know. There's so many different things that have changed since then, but you can't help but wonder what factors into the equation. Will we see Greg Dulcich return this week here for the Broncos? That's definitely something to keep an eye on. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the Broncos. We've said it before. It's kind of a cliche saying to say here in sports media, but the Broncos are in control of their own destiny. In a sense that they are, but they still have to rely on a little bit of outside help in order to be in control of potential destiny at this standpoint. It's the stakes are high, man.
They are. They really are. And look, just as much as everything went wrong for the Broncos in week 15, hey, everything could go right in week 16. We could be having a completely different podcast a week from right now, just talking about all right, Christmas Eve, the Broncos get a much needed win and they got all this help from other teams. And, they're right back in it once again. So, I mean, 3 weeks is a lot of time in the NFL. Of course, you are going to need quite a bit more help now that you didn't take care of business against either the Lions or the Texans on that 3-game road trip. Needed one of those games. But hey, like you said, you just never know what the butterfly effect is going to do. If you go back and change one outcome here, how does that change the outcome down the line? If you win that Jets game, does it change the outcome of the Chiefs game? I mean, it's not like you can just go back and swap one detail. It's kind of like a Flashpoint, right? If you watch The Flash, it's like you change one detail, you might change the entire course of existence as you know it. So, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or anything. I'm just saying, like you said, you can't really play that game and go back and say, well, if we could just change this one moment. Well, if you change that one moment, you never know what that does to the rest of the season and your mentality and your the way you approach everything and just all those different things. So I think the Broncos are in a position right now, Cody, where obviously take care of your own business, hope that others stumble around you. You need others to stumble around you at this point and force the issue, right? You got to make sure you're the aggressor. You can't come out and be playing kind of like you're got everything to lose like you did against Detroit. That's not going to work for sure. So hopefully we do see an aggressive and well equipped team that looks like they planned really well for this Patriots team and that they come out and just take care of business on Christmas Eve.
I'm with you there. That'll be something nice, little stocking stuffer for the Broncos, though. We have said, like in recent memory, Christmas Eve games have not been good to the Broncos in recent memory. Can they change their luck this upcoming weekend? That's the big question we're going to leave to you here on today's episode. Locked On Broncos, Broncos Country. We appreciate you so much for tuning into today's episode of the show. For all the everydayers out there, here's what you can expect tomorrow. We'll hear from Broncos head coach Sean Payton on his conference call. We'll recap that, and we'll also look ahead. Who are some players that you have to account for on the New England Patriots side, on their offensive side of the ball, on their defensive side of the ball? We're getting to a little bit of an early scouting preview of the most dangerous players to watch for and why Denver has to account for them. You'll get all that on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. We'll see you then.